You know, when we think of Sir Isaac Newton, we usually get that image of an apple falling from a tree, right? Boom, laws of motion and gravity. But that's barely scratching the surface. Newton was on a much bigger, much more epic quest. He wanted to find the hidden code of reality itself, a code that he believed governed everything, from the way light works all the way to the structure of history. And his entire journey kicks off with a question that honestly should make you rethink everything you see around you. So it all starts with this really simple but incredibly deep question. The world you're looking at right now, the colors, the light, everything, is that what's actually out there, or is it something your brain is cooking up for you? Newton's quest to answer this would literally change how we understand reality. And here it is. This is his absolutely mind-bending discovery. Newton figured out that color doesn't actually exist out in the world. Nope, it's a sensation that gets created inside our minds. Light rays, which are just physical things, hit our eyes, and our brain translates that physical motion into the experience of red or blue or green. What this means is that reality, the one we actually live in and experience, is a mental construction. It's the bridge where physics meets metaphysics. Okay, so here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to follow Newton's quest through 5 big stages. We'll start with his incredible discovery about light, then we'll jump into his lesser-known work on prophecy, and from there, we're going to see how his questions are still echoing today in our own crises of identity, finance, and even psychology, right up to the unseen forces that are pulling our strings right now. So let's dive in. Our journey begins with Newton's revolutionary book, Optics. Now, this wasn't just a book about how light works. It was a deep, deep exploration of that fuzzy boundary between the physical world and our conscious experience of it. Right here, Newton draws a razor-sharp line between two different worlds. See, out there, in objective reality, you've just got physical light rays, basically motion. But in here, inside what he called our sensorium or our consciousness, those physical motions are transformed into the subjective feeling of color. He even compared it to sound. A physical vibration in the air isn't a musical note until it hits our ear, and our mind turns it into the sensation of music. But he didn't stop there. I mean, not even close. The back of his book, Optics, is filled with these open questions he called queries, and honestly, they're just astonishingly ahead of their time. He literally asks if giant objects, like stars, can bend light, predicting Einstein's theory of gravitational lensing by 2 centuries. He asks if matter and light can be converted into each other. Hello, E equals mc squared. He even dreams up the concept of a black body, which became the absolute key to unlocking quantum mechanics. This guy wasn't just studying light, he was interrogating the universe for its deepest secrets. And this is where the story takes a turn that most people just don't know about. The exact same rational, analytical brain that decoded physics spent decades applying that same hardcore logic to decoding what he believed was God's divine blueprint for all of history, which he thought was hidden inside biblical prophecy. But let's be super clear, Newton was not trying to be some kind of fortune teller. In fact, he couldn't stand people who tried to predict the future. For him, prophecy was a tool for looking backwards. The idea was, once something big happened in history, you could look back at the ancient texts and see how it fit the pattern. And by doing that, you could see the hand of providence guiding everything. It was his rational way of proving the world wasn't just random chaos. He looked at something like the Book of Daniel, for example, not as a mystical story, but as a map. It laid out this really clear sequence of empires: Babylon, then Persia, then Greece, then Rome. For Newton, this was like a historical template, a logical framework for making sense of the rise and fall of these massive powers as part of a much bigger, divinely ordered system. And that, right there, was Newton's unified quest. It didn't matter if he was using a prism to split light or analyzing ancient texts. He was doing the exact same thing, hunting for the underlying laws, the simple, elegant rules that governed everything. In his mind, the physical world and the divine world weren't separate at all. They were just 2 parts of a single, unified reality that was waiting to be decoded. Okay, so we've got Newton the physicist and Newton the theologian, but why on earth should any of this matter to us right now, in the 21st century? Well, because the fundamental questions he was wrestling with, what is real and what is that reality actually built on, are more urgent and more confusing now than they have ever been. And that brings us right to our own doorstep, the modern crisis of identity. In a world of nonstop change and digital noise, so many of us are left asking, who am I, really? And inside that confusion, the line between what's real and what's not starts to get really, really blurry. The media theorist Marshall McLuhan had this absolutely chilling diagnosis for this exact problem. He argued that when a person or even a whole culture loses their sense of who they are, this search to get it back often turns violent. It becomes a desperate way of just bumping into other people to feel that you exist, to feel that you have some kind of impact. McLuhan saw this crisis getting put on hyperdrive with the rise of electric media. See, on a screen or over a phone, we become discarnate. We're basically disembodied minds, floating free from physical reality. And he argued that this loss of physical grounding leads to a kind of moral chaos, and this deep, nagging nostalgia for a time when things felt more real, a time when we felt like we had solid bodies and solid identities. Now, just like Newton realized our sensory reality is basically a mental construction, our modern social reality is also built on a shared construction. And that construction is belief. And there is nowhere, absolutely nowhere, this is more obvious than in the world of finance. To really get this, we need a modern idea that Newton would have been obsessed with. It's called hyperstition. A hyperstition is basically an idea or a story that starts out as fiction, but it becomes real because enough people believe in it and start acting like it's real. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy on steroids, pulling an idea out of the future and making it happen today. And this, right here, is the great secret of our entire financial system. It is a massive global hyperstition. The value of our money isn't based on gold or anything physical. It's based entirely on our collective belief, on credit that is literally created out of thin air. The only reason a dollar has any value is because we all agree that it does. And the way it happens is shockingly simple. When you go to a bank for a loan, they don't give you someone else's savings. They just type new numbers into your account. That's it. That new deposit is new money created by a simple accounting trick. Almost all of the money in our world is made this way, just conjured into existence by private banks through a system that runs on nothing but pure collective belief. So, if our identities are getting fragile, and our financial reality is basically a hyperstition, what does that do to us psychologically? Well, it makes us vulnerable to some really powerful unseen forces. And that brings us to the work of Carl Jung and his idea of the shadow. Jung had this idea that just like each of us has a personal shadow, the parts of ourselves we don't like and try to hide, whole societies have a shadow too. The collective shadow is the dark side of a culture, all of its unacknowledged fears, its hatreds, its historical traumas. And when a society gets stressed, this shadow can erupt with unbelievable force. And once you know what to look for, you can see the shadow playing out all around us. It shows up as projection, blaming some other group for all our internal problems. It fuels these irrational ideologies that feel so completely right but are totally immune to facts or logic. It drives scapegoating, where all of a society's anxiety gets focused on one single target. And it's the engine behind the culture wars, where attacking history becomes a way to create a simple, clean identity and avoid all the messy truths a nation doesn't want to face. So we've come full circle. Newton's quest to find the hidden code of reality, well, it's our quest too. He looked for that code in prisms and in ancient prophecies. Today, we have to look for it in the architecture of our financial system, in the weird, disembodying effects of our media, and in the dark, forgotten corners of our own collective psyche. The operating system is still running, but the language it's written in has changed. And that leaves us with one final, really urgent question to think about. If our shared reality, from the money in our pockets to the very identities we hold so dear, is ultimately constructed out of belief, who's designing the blueprint? Who are the architects? And maybe more importantly, what role are we playing in building it?